Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. And today, of course, I'm your host, Skaggly Bones, back with another cycling video. And this is another how-to video. So we did the shop tour, I did my tool setup, but in this video today, I thought it would be kind of interesting, probably helpful to talk about how best to set up your toolbox, your tool bench, your tool shelf, your pegboard, however you want to call it. As you can see, I don't have a pegboard. I do have a workbench here, a work table, whatever you want to call it. It has some miscellaneous odds and ends. We're not going to be talking about the table today. I'm going to be going through if you have a toolbox, because for most people, it's probably pretty common to buy yourself a toolbox. So I'm going to be talking about how to set up a toolbox, how I set mine up, some of the things that you want to have, some specifics, get into some more detail on how to use, or not intricacies of using certain tools, but which tools are good to use for what type of thing, and kind of go from there. Kind of a quickie on certain little things. Even though this video is probably not going to be a super short video, some of the little parts of it will be short. So some things, first of all, top of the toolbox, it's not a drawer here, obviously. So a couple of things that I do differently with my box is, instead of putting a lot of tools in here, I put a lot of miscellaneous odds and ends. So as you can see here, I have a couple of magnets, extra magnets. They stick nicely inside the toolbox. If I need an extra one, I can just come here. I can put them on the outside of the box like so, but it just keeps them from dropping around and getting in the way of everything else and falling under something. So I always keep a couple bike magnets right there inside the lid. Of course, always keep a couple of sets of Park Tool patches. Doesn't matter which brand you have. No, it doesn't. I always use the glue style, the sealant type. If ever the glue dries out, you can buy just the sealant typically at a store in larger quantities. But those are the type of patches that I use and carry all the time. Okay, always have a second set of levers. Even though I have a set of levers inside my bike bag, I always like to have a second set that I have specifically for my toolbox. Okay, as you can see here, and I've talked about this, always extra spacers for your headsets, things like that. Always keep extra bolts. Unless they're extremely rusty or extremely degraded, always like to keep the extra parts for my bike, obviously. And those I like to keep in this top drawer, just because it's out of the way of everything else. I'm not always accessing the top drawer, obviously, jockey wheels, things like that. Not too worried about it. Up here, and I before was carrying this inside my bike bag, but if I really have to adjust on the fly using this, I'm probably not going to use this tool. I'm just going to use my standard Park tool. It's what they call the Park recovery tool, which I've talked about in my bike bag video. So I went to taking this, since I was always pulling it out of the bike bag and using it to torque down. When I'm just doing headsets, I don't like to always pull out my big torque wrench. So if I'm doing just headsets, this is the most common. Obviously, this is a 4mm. A couple of my bikes have 5mm headset bolts, or stem bolts. So this doesn't always work for everything, but for the stuff that is 4mm and needs to be 5Nm torqued, this works great. Recommend you always get one, and I recommend, if you can get one of the Park Tool ones. They're a little bit more expensive, but you can actually remove these bits and put different size bits in it. So anything that it will work with anything that's 5Nm. Some of them even actually have an adjustment, so they'll go from 4Nm all the way up to like 10Nm, which is good adjustment for almost anything that you'll need on your bicycle, other than cranks and large stuff. Okay, always keep a couple of sets. Always have a couple of sets of micro screwdrivers. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about screwdrivers here. So let's talk about some screwdrivers. So people buy a micro set of screwdrivers anytime they want to do adjustment on your limit screws, and that is a terrible thing to do. So go ahead, invest yourself in a good screwdriver set. And what I recommend for a good screwdriver set, and I'll show you here, is 3 Phillips heads and 3 flatheads. Okay, Craftsman makes a great set. You can get a set by Cobalt or let's see here, Stanley. Park Tool even makes some, but get yourself, that should be your basic screwdriver setup. So as you can see here, we have a thick Phillips head or a large Phillips head. You can get them larger than this, but you never ever need it on a bicycle. Okay, so that's about the largest you'd ever need. You have a medium-sized Phillips head, and by the way, not all of these came in a set. Some of these I've purchased separately, but most of them did. And then you have should be about the smallest one that you will use right there. I don't know if it says the exact size on here. Yes, it does. So P2 is the size. P1, P2, P3, whatever, they have numbers on them. They actually say P stands for Phillip. Okay, and you have a 0 size there. That's a big one. Wait a minute, no, that's not it. Sorry. 3/16 right there. Quarter. Flatheads go by that. So you have a large flathead, a medium-sized flathead, and a smaller flathead. And that's the smallest size flathead you're going to ever want on your bicycle. Do you need a micro set? Yes, I use micro sets, but that's for if I'm actually taking apart mechanisms and getting inside some small stuff. So I always keep a jeweler's set and kind of a precision set, something like this, but most of the time I don't use that for any sort of adjustment. Okay, so just to kind of show you on the bike, so we got all 6 of these. I'm going to kind of stick them here under the roller, and then that way I can access them. So we're going to roll over to our bicycle here. And what I want to show you is we're going to pull out, let's see here. I'm not going to use that one. Let me grab, so this is typical of a micro screwdriver set, okay, that you're going to see. And that's a large size screwdriver for a micro set. And so what I want to show you is why this is bad to try to use for your limit screws. So we're going to come over here, we're going to look at the front mechanism of the bike. So those screws are inset a little bit, they're not sticking out. And so people are like, well, I can't get a big screwdriver in there. But if you look right here, you see the play that we have in that screwdriver. If I went to adjust it, if I push down really hard, I can probably adjust these screws, but the problem is over time I'm just going to wear out that screw. The screw is of a softer metal. Yes, that screw is a pretty tiny screw, but if you notice here, the slots on the screw are pretty big. So let's put this micro screwdriver away and get the proper tool for the job. So the best tool is going to be this size, and it's not a large screw, Phillips head screwdriver. If I can focus here. There's the size it is in my hand. It's not super big, but it's not super small either. So you come over to here, and it fits perfectly inside. Let's see. We can focus here. There we go. As you can see there is absolutely no play inside that head of the screw. Okay, go into the back one there, works perfectly. You can go back here to the B tension screw. That's the other one that you need to adjust, is that B tension screw. Absolutely no play whatsoever. Okay, now if you don't have that size, you're better going, if you don't have that size screwdriver, you can go up to a slightly larger size. And if you notice here, yes, the shaft is a little bit bigger, but there is absolutely no play in being able to turn that, and you won't strip out the screw. See that? Go back to show you on the B tension screw here. See that? You absolutely have no play there in the head of the screw. So if it's inset too far on the front and rear derailleur, then you might not be able to use a screwdriver, but for the most part, you have to realize your upper and lower limit screws are not you're not screwing them down really deep, and you're not raising them really far. So there's not a ton of adjustment that you actually get with those screws. The screw itself is pretty short screw, so you're not raising adjustment too far. So you don't really need you're best getting a comfortable length shaft for your screwdriver so that you're not very close to the screw itself, and you have plenty of room to hold the handle of it and adjust properly. Okay, if all else fails, in fact, I'll even show you, this is a large size, and that's going to even fit in there properly, and there's absolutely no play in there. That grips perfectly. It goes inside the slot. So the heads of these screws are made to be able to use a standard screwdriver. So don't be worried that you don't have a screwdriver that's going to fit your upper and lower limit switches. Most everybody has this standard size screwdriver. In fact, you could even use a shorty screwdriver. This stubby screwdriver, though, the problem is you're not going to be able to get your hand on that handle. So that's why I probably wouldn't use that. Okay, so if all else fails and you don't have a good Phillips head screwdriver, get yourself a good flathead. Have a good flathead screwdriver. Almost everybody typically around the house will have a flathead and a Phillips head screwdriver. So if your Phillips head screwdriver is stripped out, don't go using it. If you don't have time to go buy one, but you still need to adjust it, get yourself a good flathead screwdriver, like so. And there is two slots. We're going to go to the back one so you can see a little bit better. So if you can see, there's two slots. There's a short slot right here, which is meant for the Phillips tips, and then you have this second slot here, which is meant to be able to use a flathead screwdriver on it, and then you can actually adjust your upper and lower limit switches, screws. Sorry about that. I said squinges, and your B-tension screw, and you can adjust that properly by using a flathead screwdriver. So that's just to prove, folks, that you can use a flathead. Use the proper size screwdriver and you won't strip it out. So if all else fails, always use a flathead. A flathead is better than too small of a Phillips head screwdriver. Like I said, lots of people have these micro sets now used for electronics and things of that such. Don't use these type of sets for doing adjustments. People think, oh, it's small. It's a small screwdriver. It's for adjustments. That's not the case. I'm going to open this up and show you what I'm talking about here. So yeah, this is your largest size Phillips head. That is way too small to fit in there. Yes, it seems like that would be the right size because it's a small screw, but the head is too small for the head of the screw, and it's just going to strip it out. So don't use that. Okay, always keep one of these around if you're going to have a well-stocked toolbox. These do come in handy for other stuff, but I don't use it for that. So done with talking about screwdrivers. So always keep a little thing here. This happened to be where for a roll of tape, electrician's tape that I bought. Keep a little container. I have some little wear patches here for cables. Always keep a couple extra spare batteries, coin batteries here for my cycling computers. Always keep a couple extra zip ties here as well. It's a great thing to keep. I keep a set of spare road cables here. As you can see, you have some cable ends in there. Of course, always keep a set of cable ends here as well. I go through a lot of those. Okay, so a couple shims for a whole set of brake levers, but I still use them. Okay, so keep a couple of multi-tools. Keep 3 rolls of electrician's tape. Depends what colors. Typically, I'll keep 4 or 5 different colors. And that way, whatever handlebar tape I use, I got the colors that I want. Okay, keep a couple of these small little vices. These work great if you don't have a third hand tool. You can use these to clamp down on the brakes and adjust the brakes the way you want them. Even if you do have a third hand tool, it helps you get started by clamping down the brakes, and then you can get your brakes properly adjusted. Not for your mountain bike brakes, but it does work for your caliper brakes. So always keep a couple of these guys around. Okay, these are some extra from your tire liners for a mountain bike, and I keep these around, and sometimes I'll throw these in the back of the bag because what happens is if you get a huge split in the tire, you have a tire blowout. What I will do is I'll cut a piece of this, and I keep these for road bikes. It won't work if you get a big blowout on a mountain bike tire, but the chances of you getting a huge rip in a mountain bike tire are a lot more rare than a huge rip in a road bike tire. So what I do is, now on this set here, on this bike here, I have tire liners in here. This bike I didn't get tire liners because I'm running the hard shells, so I didn't feel a need for running tire liners. But I will keep a set of this if I was to get a heavy rip near the end of a ride, instead of trying to take a piece of plastic or something else from a candy wrapper or something. This stuff is pretty heavy and it's pretty thick and it's pretty wide. And so what you do is you would cut a section of this off, kind of take your knife and cut the edges off a little bit, put this in and surround it, put this inside the tire right over where the rip and the hole is, making sure you got enough length of it to cover over the hole. So this will be simulating on the inside, and then you put that up there, and then you put the inner tube in over it. And what this will do is, the reason you can't put an inner tube back in there and blow it up is the fact that the inner tube will squeeze out through the hole and pop and rupture again. It's pretty much the same thing as a pinch flat. So what you can do is you put this in there, and this will act as a barrier between the inner tube and the outside of the against the ground. Now my suggestion is don't pump it up as much, put less pressure in. If you have to take that tire, if you're stuck and you got a ways to get home, granted you want the better tire on the front, but because you're putting a lot more pressure on your rear tire at that point, I suggest taking the rear, whichever is, if it's on the front, that's fine, leave it on the front. If it's on the rear that you get the rupture, take that rear tire, put it on the front. And this is against a lot of school of thought. People are like, well, you always want your best tires on the front. That is true to an extent, but at that point you've lost probably so much traction anyways, and your front tires are probably going to be pretty close to being worn out as well. So put the good tire on the back, just so you can hobble yourself home, and then what you're going to need to do is just ride at a slower pace, and then you can kind of monitor your front tire a little bit easier than can your back. So then put this on there, and then pump your tire back up to of course patch your inner tube or use a new inner tube, pump your tire up, and just not have it pumped up as heavy, okay, because this is going to act as a barrier, but it's not going to 100% seal. So you don't want, the rip can become, if you put too much pressure, air pressure on it, what's going to happen is you're going to actually push against the tire, and the tire is going to rip open even more. Okay, so you want to be careful about that. Now, normally your Continentals, they have what's called a poly breaker, which prevents against ripping. If you were to wear the tire out, it prevents against ripping even farther. But like I said, always keep extra of this, put it in your saddlebag, and use that. Okay. So last but not least, I have this old multi-tool, and it had a chain breaker on it, and I use this because I don't have to use a secondary tool with it, and this is my main chain brake tool. So I didn't go out, and I could have bought a fancier one, but this is pretty strong. It's steel, as you can see, because it's rusting, so it's strong enough. I don't really use it as multi-tool function anymore, just because it looks kind of like garbage. Okay, always keep a laser leveler. This works great. Great thing to have is a laser leveler. Helps you get your bars and stems perfect setup every single time. Okay, so that's kind of what I keep in the top of my toolbox. That's a lot of stuff, but things that you're going to collect over time, put in your toolbox, gives you a chance to really have some good flexibility with your working on your bike. Obviously, I've talked about this before in one of the other videos. I keep in the top part of this box, in the top portion, I keep all my sockets and stuff. So I keep, what I do is I keep sockets based on the size of the ratchet. This is obviously a 1/4. So we use the 1/4 inch, and I have metric, standard, deep, and shallow sockets as well. I do have some files. Always keep some files around. If you get a little burr on your rim, on the braking surface, You can always use this. You can always use this kind of a rounded one and file that down a little bit if you get a heavy burr on your braking surface. Also, it's good sometimes you will get some rust on your disc brakes, okay? And I take a greenie to that first, but if you're having a little bit of trouble, if you take a very, very fine one, and it's mostly on the edges, so mostly right inside the holes here, you get some rust, and just taking a very fine, very thin file, mostly a file for modeling and that type of stuff. This is a set of Craftsman. You can get pull out the round one right there. That round one is great for getting in those holes, and great for getting rid of that rust. Also, get rid of any burrs. Okay. Always keep a set of greenies around, because if you got to take off rust off rotors, it's the best way to do it. Also, if you get grease and oil on your rotors and on your brake pads for your disc brakes, that's a great thing to do. Okay, so if as well I use the files, so let's say I was to get some grease embedded in the rubber on this, I would just file them down a little bit. I hate to waste pads, so just file them down, and that's, yeah, you're taking down the life of the brake pad, but it's better than throwing away and starting brand new. So you can always get rid of all that grease by just filing them down a little bit. Same thing with your disc rotors, or sorry, your disc pads. Okay. Obviously, more sockets. Not going to go into sockets a whole lot. Got to always keep a couple of different ratchets. It's good to have extras in case one breaks. This is the most common size you're probably going to use for pretty much everything. Obviously, we have our largest ones that you're going to probably ever need. And of course, you use these for other things as well, not just for your bicycle. But when you're starting to get into some of your larger stuff, and you're starting to get into bottom bracket tools, and you're getting into your rear hub tools, you can see here for your rear cassette, you can use an adjustable wrench like so, or you can just use a socket. Typically, oh, not that size. It's that size right there. I always forget which one it is. It is a 1-inch. Okay, so your 1-inch socket fits perfectly, and then you get a lot better torque on it as well as then being able to actually use a torque wrench that I have here, and then being able to torque it down. So this isn't necessary, but I have one. I've had this for a long time. I had this before I had the smaller torque wrench, and so this is what I use if I'm going to do my bottom bracket stuff. Okay, so bottom, I got my large torque wrench here. I got all my Allen keys. This is the main drawer I go out of because I have all my Allen keys and stuff in it. And then I even have my socket Allen keys. I keep one ratchet in here that's a good ratchet so that I can use it to tighten down these with using the Allens, the ratcheting Allens. And I have a set of those in metric. I do not have a set in standard because the only time I ever use these is for working on the bikes, and everything's metric on the bikes. I do have a little adapter here. Obviously, that's for the smallest torque wrench. And if you had to use you wanted to use a smaller ratchet, you could kind of do that if you don't want to use a big ratchet. Okay. Obviously, keep a couple sets of Allens. These are my better Allens. I have standard and regular and metric. They do have these little T-handles, which do make it nice if you got to get some torque behind it. But the nice thing about these is that they're both bondless and flat. Okay. Then I keep this set just if I need a little bit longer shank here and I want flat. Okay. And I want to get it torqued down. Kind of put it in the T-handle like so. Let's see, you get the 8 here, 8mm. Kind of give you an idea how this thing works. I believe it's this one here. So if I needed kind of a T-handle, I could use this one, and I could use it as a T-handle right there, just like that. Okay. This, if I'm using it as a T-handle, I'm going to be using the bondless end, and I don't always like doing that. It's great for speed, but if I want to be torquing something down, I don't really to do it that way. But for the most part, if I'm going to torque something down pretty tight as an Allen, with an Allen key, I'm going to use these little wrench ones. I'm going to grab a wrench here. And that's why it's always good to have a couple different wrenches. That way you can get a little bit longer wrench. If you have to, you can get yourself an adapter set that goes from this size to an even smaller one, and you could use a big, hefty socket for that. Or, most people will tell you don't wrench using your torque wrench, but this is a pretty long handle, so you could set it up at a very high torque if you didn't want it to be torquing all the time. If you're just trying to get something tightened and not use it as a torque wrench, and you could use this as a ratchet. Okay, also have some star keys here as well, because every once in a while you'll find a bolt that's star. The nice thing about the torque keys is it's all one standard. You don't have to worry about Allen sizes or anything like that. It's not like Allen's where you have standard and metric, just one size for all torques. Obviously the two bottom drawers, these are bigger drawers, so I have one that has all my wrenches in it, including my bottom bracket tool, since it's more like a wrench. I have our pedal tool, pedal spanner. This is just the one size. Park Tool does make a double and a triple pedal spanner, which gives you a little bit more versatility if you have some of those odd pedals. But for the most part, most people are going to be using 8mm Allen keys. Okay, but sometimes on my road bike, which I have these speed plays, I have the ability to do with both. And sometimes it's just a little bit easier to use this large pedal spanner than trying to use an Allen key back there to get it off. Of course, I have a couple of different adjustable wrenches. Have a large size, what's called 12-inch heavy duty, and then I have a 10-inch here. You can get a smaller one as well, but for the most part I find that adjustable wrenches, you don't really need them smaller than a 10-inch. Have both metric and standard wrenches, box wrenches, and what I like is I like star on one end, so if you need a little bit more torque and you don't want some slippage. And then of course, if you need to get in some tight spaces, you got this if you can't really get over a bolt. So always keep a set of these. Obviously you have them in the metric as well. But a lot of nuts you'll find are standard, they're not metric on bikes when you get into some stuff. So the number obviously is the millimeter. Okay, got a few miscellaneous extras. And then obviously you got back here, we got cone wrenches. So make sure you have yourself a good set of cone wrenches. I did a video on these cone wrenches a little bit ago and talked about them when I got them in. So you got your 15-13. I got two 15-13s just because I bought that when I bought my James bike, and I needed a 15-13 cone wrench. That was the only size I needed. Now of course with the Giant, I need the 16-15, okay, and then you need a 16-17 or 18-17. So you need a 17 and a 16, okay. The problem is I need a secondary of this guy. So at some point I'm going to have to spend a couple bucks and order another one of these. I have doubles of everything else. I have a double of that. You got your 14-13. So we got 3 13s, 2 15s. Let's see here. Yeah, 3 15s, 3 13s, a single 14, single 17, single 18. Okay, so a lot of them are 15 millimeters, but I'm going to have to buy an extra one of, I only need one of these. Sorry. Yeah, I only need one of the 16, but I need 2 of the 17. So I'm gonna have to buy another 17, 18. I wish they had one that was a 16, 17 or a 16, 18 to make it a little bit better. Now I have both, but that's what I need. So I'm gonna have to buy an extra cone wrench. Not a big deal. Typically, what I recommend is that when you get the 4 set, this is what you're gonna get. You're gonna get these 4. Okay, order 2 of them. That's going to cost you $20. A set of these cone wrenches are $10. Okay, so that's pretty much $3 a tool, almost. a little bit less, $2.50 a tool. Okay, not expensive at all. Sometimes if you buy them in the shop, you're going to spend $4 a tool. Still, that's not bad. You're spending $40 for a full set of 8 cone wrenches, 8 individual cone wrenches. In reality, you're getting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You're getting 16 different tools altogether. So recommended buying 2 sets. Always do that, and then you'll never not have the proper cone wrench when you change out your wheels. And wheels change can happen because one of the first things to get upgraded is wheels. Okay, so that's for that. Okay, lower drawer, like always, like I kind of talked about, alluded to, always keep a good screwdriver set. Excellent screwdriver set, Craftsman made. You want that, okay? And then I keep my flat heads and my Phillips heads kind of separated. As you can see here, grabbing off the bottom. That's why I like one of these rolling seats. You can always get to what you need. You can throw tools under there if you want. So have a set of screwdrivers. I kind of leave them on top. Obviously, you want a couple of mallets, both a standard rubber mallet and a smaller one. Also, always have a couple of hammers, standard hammers as well. Being a claw foot and a ball peen, you kind of want to have access to those. Some specialized tools you don't really need, stuff you can make yourself. You can make one of these yourself. You don't really need this. This is a chain holding tool. This allows me to hold the chain together when I'm first putting on a brand new chain, and I'm trying to take the amount of links I need out of it. I don't really use this when I am reinstalling a chain, because I do use this tool and I kind of just use it to hold it together. Pull the tool, put it on the outer links here for the quick relink, and then I just spread it like that, and then that pops it in place. But I just kind of hook the links on the outside of this tool, and the tool holds it together as well. This is mostly for when you're fitting a brand new chain. You got a lot of extra links, so you can grab a link and you can have some slack in here while you use your chain tool. To break those links out. So that's what I use that for. What do you do if you want to make one? Just take an old coat hanger, bend it, and you got one of these. Okay, but this I think I got with one of these other tools. It cost me a couple bucks. I didn't have to fiddle with making something. So as far as other things, I always keep a couple sets of panel locks, and I keep this one set from Vice Grip that actually locks into place. And the reason is, if for some reason I don't have a size wrench that I need adjustable wrench will always work. But if I need to lock onto something a little bit heavier and I don't care about marring it up so much, I use this. Now, there is a company that makes one just like this that locks into place, similar to this third hand tool does. It has some little ratcheting things there, and this is flat. So you can use it instead of using an adjustable wrench like this. It's kind of like an adjustable wrench that locks into place, and you're clamping down on it this way, okay? And it actually locks into place this way. It has kind of like a little screw here, and that ratchets it up and down. And they're not cheap, but you talk to the Bike Pro, the mechanics that work on it for the Bike Pros, and that's one of the best tools they use. You can find them on Amazon. I don't remember the name to it, but they work absolutely wonderful from everything I've heard. Obviously, we got a crank remover tool. Third hand tool, absolutely invaluable. Even if it's an inexpensive one like one of these, you can get a Park Tool one. They're a little bit more expensive. Handles are a little bit thicker on the Park Tool one. This company called Ice Tools, they make excellent tools. They just don't put huge, thick, heavy handles on it, because over time sometimes the rubber peels off anyways. One of the nice things I like about Park Tools is, you can see here, these handles are never going to come off. These tools are pretty much guaranteed for life. They're never going to break. They're never going to be destroyed. Okay, so just work forever. But if you can't get a hold of a higher end Park Tool one, at least get one like this Ice Tool. This isn't something that you're going to be cranking on so much that you're going to probably break it. It should work very well for what you want. And this is made out of nice stainless steel. It's pretty heavy duty. What the third hand tool is it allows you to clip on to the cable here, and I'm not going to actually do it because what it does is actually puts the little crimps in here. So I always do it when I got longer cable, when I got a long section of cable, and then I pull up on this, and this part pulls back. Oops, sorry, got out of the view here. This part pulls back, and then you have this little bit of locking mechanism, and there we go. What this locking mechanism does, as you can see there, the locking mechanism keeps this in place. This pushes up against the mech, and then this pulls the cable out. So it keeps your cable tension so that you're not sitting there pulling on the cable to keep it tight. And then it allows you to tighten it once. So you're not spending multiple times trying to tighten your cables. You get your cables right the first time. The secret to great shifting is tight cables. So third hand tool works wonders. Chain whip tool, obviously you got to have that if you're going to be taking off your rear cassette. I recommend it anyways because you should be doing maintenance on your rear hubs. Some wire strippers, not really important. Kind of got a little gauge here, a thin gap gauge, which I like to use for my mountain bike rotors. So this is how I adjust my mountain bike brakes. And what I do is you have these, let me get it out here. So you pull out the tool like so, and then on either side you have a protector because these gauges are thin metal, okay? And then you pull out the other side here, and you have different gauges, okay? So what you do is you find the gap you want, obviously. Let's see here, I can show you here. So you see this gap here, this is very super thin. I'm not going to use a gap like that. I'm going to probably go to something like that, okay? And that's the type of gap I want. In fact, I could probably almost go so far as to say I could probably almost use this largest one, maybe not the largest, but like the third largest, and use that to actually gap my brakes. And so that works just by putting that in there in between the brake caliper and the rotor, and then you can actually use that. You put it up against the brake rotor, and then you can actually use it to adjust the brake pads, because you have a little adjustment here. So you want to get, what you want is this to be as close to the rotor without touching. So on that side I get a super thin one. So I get one that's ultra thin, okay? Because if you have too much play, you're going to pull on this, your brake levers, and what's going to happen is you're pulling on your brake levers, and if you have too much play, your brake rotor, what's going to happen is you're going to push the brake rotor over into this thing, and you're going to actually over time bend your rotors. That's the last thing you want. So I get a really super fine one like this, and I put that up inside there on the rotor, and that's how I gap the rotors. Okay, and then once I'm done gapping it, it actually tells you the millimeter there, 0.011 millimeters. Or sorry, 0.279 millimeters, 0.011 is the actual gauge. Okay, so I don't use these just as a gauge. I actually use this as an alignment tool to actually set up it. Did I buy this for that? No. I had this as a machining tool when I worked in a machine shop, and so now I use it for this. Works perfect. Okay, and then when I'm setting up the other side, I set up the largest gap, because and then what that does is it gives me a real tight. You notice here I'm not pulling very far at all on my brakes. I don't like to have a long pull. I want my brakes to be extremely responsive. So that's how I set up that. And probably what I'll do is I'll do a video just on setting up the brakes. Okay, so that's how I do that. Always have your set of shears. These are titanium shears, so they're titanium blades. These aren't that expensive. You can get them at Home Depot for probably about $20. I love using these because they'll never wear down. They are just like standard shears, but they're a little bit heavier duty, more of a tool quality than they are like the shears. They're spring loaded. They're going to have a spring in there, so you don't have to worry about opening them in and out like you would standard hand shears. Okay, and these are for cutting metal. So the nice thing about these is they're not tin snips, but if you had thin enough metal, they're made for cutting screen doors, the metal for screen doors, but they would work for pretty much everything else. So I love using these for cutting rubber. If I need to take extra tires, old tires that I got, and I'm going to cut them up to use them for patches, kind of like I use with the tire liners, that's what I'm going to use, because that's about the only thing that's going to cut through it. And then I'm not using a knife, and I'm not going to hurt myself. So awesome to have a nice pair of very sharp, very strong shears, and then you're not cutting yourself. Obviously more cable strippers. Of course, we got our Park Tool cable cutters. You always want, for cables, you want a very sharp, very heavy duty set for wound braided cable. The reason is, if you don't use something sharp, you use something like this. I'll just show you, give you a look here. So you see this? See how those are nicked? These aren't very heavy duty. These are for just plain wire, just plain small wire. Okay, electrical wire. So you don't want to use something like this for cutting heavy duty brake cable. You want to use something like this, and you're not going to nick them. These are very heavy duty. They're not super sharp as far as like a blade, but when they come together, they're going to cut anything. And if you notice how heavy they are, and then also you have the crimp tool down here at the bottom. So absolutely excellent. One thing I do with these is when I'm using them a lot and I got to crimp them, this piece technically flips up like this, and then it's out of the way, but sometimes it flips down and gets out of your way. So all I do is I pull this piece off when I'm using them a lot. If I'm doing a bike build, when I was doing the bike build for the mountain bike the other day, I actually pulled this piece off and I just left them open. Okay, got another set of cutters. Always keep 2 sets of cutters, and then you're always good to go. Okay, obviously you have a chain checker. You want to keep a good chain checker here. Check your chain. That's simple to use. Just put it in one side. Here, if it's on the 7.5, real quick way to do this, all chains are the same. So you hook it in here whichever way you think is going to be, what you want to look for. The 7.5 is the limit. Obviously, it's not dropping down into it at all, so we're good to go. Now, some chains actually are made that they're not supposed to go beyond the 5, or it's not supposed to go into the 5 at all. Okay, so if it is, it's worn. This one, it's a mountain bike chain. It's allowed to go into the 5. It's not as tight of a tolerance because that's a 9-speed. Okay, when you get into the let's see here. If you notice there, this is 11-speed, right? That's touching on top, so that's what you want. Okay, you get a little bit faster stretch with thinner, or I should say it's not really stretch so much, because you're never going to stretch this steel. What you're actually doing is wearing down the rollers. So thinner chain, easier to wear down, but if you keep them lubed, you keep them clean, you'll wear them down. Your wear will be a lot less. In fact, I've had a chain, that chain there, for short of rusting, I've used that chain for probably about 15,000 miles. And I'll show you here. If you look right there, it's not even in at all. So there is absolutely no wear on this chain at all. And that's because I keep this chain lubed. I went with the highest end trim 9-speed that I could get, and I keep it lubed all the time. I clean it all the time. I use degreaser WD-40. I actually take a brush in between each one of the links all the time. Always clean this when I'm riding it. Okay, same thing on this bike. Okay, because it's a better chain, and I'm always cleaning, always making sure it's really good. So you do that, and you're going to extend the life of your chain. But make sure you keep a chain checker, because you don't want it to get beyond this point. If it's beyond this point, the 0.75, what's going to happen is you're going to actually, the chain then being worn is going to wear the rear cassette. And rear cassettes are a lot more expensive than a chain. Now, granted, there are chains that are a lot more expensive than rear cassettes. But if you're spending $100 on your chain, you should have a lot more expensive than a $20 rear cassette. So if it comes down to that, you got this $100 chain. The problem is too, you're going to also wear your front mech, or your your front chain rings as well. So that's the last thing you want to do is wear these cogs, because these get very expensive. So keep your chain good, your whole drivetrain will run good. So last but not least, bottom shelf. Obviously I got specialized tools down here just because I don't have a lot of room to put these anywhere else. I got an alignment tool. They cost about $69 online. I love having one of these. When we did the mountain bike build, if you remember, we had a bent derailleur hanger, and the last thing I would have wanted to do is order one of those. So this has saved my life many times. If every time I replaced the derailleur hanger it was bent, I would replace a derailleur hanger probably once every month, and that's $20 every month. So this has paid for itself 100 times over. Obviously we've made ourselves a bearing press. We got a bearing removal tool here for press fit bottom brackets. We have our dummy hub, invaluable. Of course we have our smaller torque wrench. We got plenty of grease and oil, got our grease gun, got our wet lubes and our dry lubes here. Okay, I swear by White Lightning, I don't get anything else. It's other than the Park Tool grease and a standard grease that I get just from whoever, it doesn't matter, whatever, fiber grip tape, or sorry, fiber grip paste. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I swear by White Lightning, I don't go with anything else. So folks, that's it for me today for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully this gave you a lot more insight in how to use your tools, what kind of tool setup you should have, and basically the best way for servicing your bikes. So make sure you guys hit that subscribe button. It helps me out with the channel, helps to keep everything running, and like always, keep riding.